Today I want to talk about women and the environment, and as we all know, the domination of the environment by humans, mainly in the global north, is a problem that's increasing in severity and relevance. And since like the Industrial Revolution and the encouragement after that of consumerism and widespread use of chemicals and pollutants in water, air, and land, all of these things are components of globalization, and they're understood to be the point in time at which the environmental degradation and destruction saw a shift in severity and speed. And so it's difficult to deny that these effects are problematic, although some people try, because they're causing substantial threats to human, animal, and plant life all over the world. And this is evident by the increasing number of natural disasters, the global food crisis, and the widespread pollution that's having really adverse effects on people's health. So specifically what I want to talk about today is the links between the oppression of women and the degradation of the environment in a specifically capitalist globalization. So I also want to talk about the way that women are affected, especially adversely and uniquely, by environmental degradation, particularly women of color, indigenous women, women of the global south, and certainly poor and working class women. So also I want to address the ways that women around the world are organizing and fighting back to protect their environments and their communities in response to environmental degradation, but also in response to the sort of mainstream political capitalist solution to environmental degradation and the sort of go green movement that we hear about, because the idea that we can buy our way out of the environmental crisis is not a progressive idea, and it's not gonna solve the problem. So I want to start just by offering a quote from Vandana Shiva, who is an Indian author and activist. She's one of my favorite ecofeminist authors, and she writes, "Globalization has two meanings. It can refer to our universal humanity, to cultures of compassion and solidarity, to our common identity as Earth citizens. I call this globalization Earth democracy. The dominant meaning and form of globalization is economic or corporate globalization. This is the globalization of the capitalist patriarchy, in which everything is a commodity, everything is for sale, and the only value a thing has is the price which it can bring in the global marketplace." So she writes that in her book, Earth Democracy. I encourage all you guys to check it out. It's a really great book. I just wanted to start with this quote because I think she highlights a really important point, and that is that the globalization that we're seeing right now is specifically patriarchal, misogynistic, and capitalist. And this is very significant to the expansion of neoliberal ideologies and policies, and this expansion is very detrimental to the environment, and it's really affecting people disproportionately. So many of us know that historically in a lot of different cultures, women have been seen as more connected to the environment. This is because of women's reproductive capabilities and the sort of nurturing and life-sustaining expectations that accompany motherhood. And this association is definitely present in a Western context, especially the United States. And it's really used to justify the domination and the destruction of both women and of the environment. And we see this all the time in the mainstream media through the feminization of nature, in which nature is presented as somehow inherently female, and like through the use of the term Mother Nature, and by gendering nature by using female pronouns, things like that. We see it all the time, really. And we also see the naturalization of women, in which women are described using adjectives that one would describe nature, like things like unpredictable, wild, uncontrollable, irrational, all those things. So being that Western society is patriarchal and largely misogynistic, it's no surprise that in a society where women are oppressed, nature is oppressed as well. So the sort of Western attitudes about nature in patriarchal, capitalist, scientific, and imperial senses have been that nature should not exist freely, but that it should be controlled and conquered. And this is particularly true when profit is a possibility. Oh, thank you. So the reduction of nature to an economic resource is similar to the way that patriarchal values really reduce women to resources for reproduction. And this portrayal of nature as female and is available for dissection through experimentation really justified the manipulation of natural resources for profit. In the Western world, prior to the Industrial Revolution, this control and domination of women really, the way that it manifested was through the land appropriation of native people's lands and the changing the ecology of colonized lands. And in the post-industrial revolution era, what we see is this form of globalized capitalism that is really perpetuating the current ecological crisis that we have. So the mainstream discourse on environmental degradation, like what we saw in December in Copenhagen, was basically portrayed the global south as the main issue, the main problem, and the ones who are perpetuating the ecological crisis. They portrayed third world and fourth world countries as contributors to environmental degradation through issues like population and attacks on women, and saying that women's reproduction was the issue through issues like overpopulation. But in reality, it's the consumption patterns of the global north that's really perpetuating and creating the ecological crisis. So it's things like the transnational corporations that are polluting in third world countries so that people in the West don't have to deal with what's going on, and people who are in these countries live with pollution and cancers in their hoods and things like that. So for us, really, to combat environmental injustice, we need to hold the United States and other countries accountable for their actions, and make sure that they're not denying the fact that the crisis is a crisis of the West and of the North. So, sorry, 1 second. So not only do we need to hold the polluters of the North responsible, but we also need to encourage that countries of the global North are compensating countries of the global South for the issues that they're living with now. There's been irreversible damage for countries of the global South and for indigenous populations, and it's really a result of globalized capitalist greed and its disregard for nature and its disregard for the sustainability of life. So in Copenhagen this past December, there was a strong presence of activists in response to the climate talks that were going on that really weren't seeking an actual solution to the climate problem. A lot of these activists were women, a lot of them were indigenous people, and they were really looking to hold world leaders accountable for their actions. And world leaders such as Barack Obama, who continually deny that that the U.S. should be responsible for the issues. So leaders of the North proposed in Copenhagen things like cutting carbon emissions by really minuscule margins, creating hybrid vehicles, conserving energy by recycling, all these things that we hear all the time, and saying that this is the best way to combat the environmental crisis. But despite the conclusion that climate change is happening faster than we anticipated, they're still not addressing the capitalist issues and industries that are really responsible for environmental degradation, like the oil industry, the meat industry, commercialized agriculture. So really the problem is that we're looking for a solution in the wrong place. We should be looking at the environmental crisis as an issue rooted in imperialism and colonialism, racism, economic injustice, misogyny, patriarchy, animal rights, all of these things, and we should be fighting them on every front. So we need to see the connections among all these oppressions and the way that they result from the same thing, from the same place. So the only true way that we can protect the environment is to do this. That's the only way to ensure that people have sustainable livelihoods And that's the only way also to liberate women. So.
Absolutely.